It's Tech of the Month time and we have a jam-packed episode for all of you. This month we're going to be taking a look at some of the weirdest bike videos Joe and I have seen online. We've got some bikes which seem to be leaked ahead of the Tour de France, and we're also going to be taking a look at some wheels which claim to be made of recycled carbon fibre. And we're also going to be taking a look at Muc-Off's battery operated pressure washer. But first, it's time for Tech of the Gram. Now, every month Joe and I send each other videos on Instagram pretty much daily. So we've scrolled back over the last few weeks and we have picked out some of the videos which have made us raise our eyebrows the most. So Joe, kick us off. Where are we starting?
So the first one we've got is actually posted by GP Llama, or Shane Miller, out from Australia, and he's posted a video of himself running Zwift on the latest generation Hammerhead Karoo. That's the third generation that was released alongside the recent SRAM Red. It's kind of strange, isn't it, to see that software running on a tiny little GPS head unit. And there's a couple of interesting reasons why this is actually possible. So I was on the SRAM Red launch and they pulled in together resources, so Hammerhead launched their new product at the same time. And on that launch, they told us that the software actually runs off Android, and that is why they can pretty much just, like, you can sideload Zwift onto the app. If the integration is there, you can kind of run it without even jailbreaking the device.
Wow, that's pretty mental. I guess, the thing that surprises me is that the computing power of that head unit is enough to actually run Zwift, but then it also makes you wonder what other apps could you sideload into the device?
For sure. I don't really know where this would stop. I'm not exactly sure on the sort of integration you'd have to have from the sort of the software developer's side. But yeah, it made me think, where are the limits of this? For example, some creature comforts. Could we have Spotify, or could you just simply have Google Maps? Could you completely disregard the native mapping system on the Hammerhead, which, by the way, is brilliant?
Yeah.
But, you know, Google Maps is, to my mind, still better. So yeah, it's interesting to see where this could go, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the thing though, is like, one, is there actually a generic, like an actual use case for this, and what is actually better than the software that comes preloaded on the device? But I think it was, to be honest, I just thought it was weird, and it just looked funny. It looked really weird seeing Zwift, but on a head unit. Yeah,
for sure. In Shane's hand as well, like just in the palm of the hand, it's quite funny. And also, I think as well, like Sam said, absolute testament to the processing power of that device.
Yeah.
Which they did say the processing power is 3 times faster. And I think on the sort of native software, you can't, you know, those sort of changes aren't often tangible, but there you go, it can run Zwift.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, another one that I saw was a pretty ridiculous handlebar setup. Now, this one, it was done as a joke, of course.
Makes you cringe, doesn't it?
Oh, but when you look at it, it just looks, I mean, even though it's a joke, you kind of still put yourself in the position of like, okay, well, if this was reality, could I actually ride it? And it's those TT extensions. One, you'd have to be absolutely ginormous. You'd have to be huge to be able to reach them. But then also, if you think about the leverage that's on the steerer tube there, if you were to like lean forwards, I imagine they would just snap instantly.
You are asking for trouble, aren't you? I think personally, I have too much pride in my bike and too much love for my sternum to ever ride a setup like that. It is obviously incredibly dangerous, and I'm very glad this was. Was it actually a joke?
Well, so one of the hashtags in the description says it's a joke. So
surely, please.
Yeah, because that is, I mean, to be honest, it does just look hilarious, actually. Joe, you sent me a pretty good one, actually, which wasn't a video, but it was a post. And I think, to be honest, it just perfectly highlights the different ages of different cyclists out there.
It does indeed, doesn't it? And actually, it highlights quite how young I am as well, I think.
It makes me wonder what's next, though. And I think what we will see is, we'll see those hoods get straightened out again, but then just super narrow bars.
Super narrow bars, you heard it first. I've said it before and I will say it again. By the end of the year, we will most certainly have people riding crazy narrow handlebar setups, and there you go. Whoever the next generation ends up being, that's what it's going to be.
100%. Last weekend was the Monaco Grand Prix. Now, don't worry, we're not about to start talking about F1, but one of the drivers, who these days tends to be more of a cyclist than they are an F1 driver, turned up to the race on board a bike which looks to be an unreleased Canyon Aero. That's right, Valtteri Bottas was seen on a bike with some very new looking handlebars. Now, the reason why we believe that this could be the new Aero is because we actually saw an Instagram video, and I think it was a story by Vanderpool, who had the same looking bars, and that was it. So Joe, what do we know? What do we think?
Well, we don't know that much, to tell you the truth. I have done a lot of digging on this subject because I first spotted that story post by Mathieu van der Poel, and I was very intrigued, and I tried very hard to find any other images of him on that bike. Since then, he seems to have been training on his current Canyon Aero, the one with World Champ stripes. But yes, the main takeaway here is there seems to be a sort of integrated mount. That's what gives away that this is the new handlebar. But the images we have don't give too much away. There was a couple of head-on images as well that were on Getty. Now, I looked at those last week. They've since been deleted. So clearly Canyon are not wanting to let this one out of the bag just yet. And again, that would inform me that really this is definitely a new and unreleased bike, not just a handlebar necessarily. But on first impressions, it looks like there might be a slightly redesigned head tube. It looks a little bit narrower. And as I say, a new handlebar. But really, comparing photos where, you know, we're zooming in a lot here, it's hard to go off. But very interesting, I think, that Canyon have chosen to put that bike beneath Valtteri Bottas before, you know, other big name Canyon riders.
Yeah, it's a really valid point, because I guess we just have to remember that, one, he does actually have quite a lot of marketing power, but he's also right there in bed with Canyon, isn't he? So I guess maybe we shouldn't be surprised. But that wasn't the only bike that we think might be coming out ahead of the Tour de France, because on Weight Weenies, there was a leaked picture of what could have been a catalogue, like a Trek product catalogue, showing what could potentially be a new Amonda or Madone. I mean, this bike has been circulated around now for quite a lot, purely because it was spotted back in January of this year. And again, now that we've seen this picture, I think it's very clear what this bike is going to be. And that's a kind of a stripped back, lightweight Madone or a more aero Amonda. I would put a lot of money on the fact that they're creating one bike to rule them all, much like the Tarmac SL8.
Yeah. I think it's very likely, isn't it? They're clearly, the photos that we've seen all point towards this sort of taking the aerodynamic learnings from the Madone and kind of applying that to the sort of lighter weight tube shapes of the Amonda. Something's definitely on the horizon, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the timing couldn't really be better, because if you think about this, I mean, so many bikes always get released at the Tour de France. So if we don't see anything at the Dauphiné, then it will probably come at the Tour, I think. So yeah, I think there's definitely a couple of interesting bikes on the way very soon.
Now, we've said it before, we're in May now. 2024 has been the year of the wheel, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Everyone's trying to reinvent the wheel. We've countless releases of different new wheels, and another one now from Hunt, but slightly different. You mentioned in the intro, sustainable carbon fibre.
Yeah, I mean, the two terms don't really tend to go together, do they?
The very nature that carbon is cured at thousands of degrees, it requires a lot of energy. It's hard to make it a sustainable process, really, isn't it?
Well,
but
exactly.
What have Hunt done?
So what they have done is they have launched a new range called the Sustain Phase 1 range. Now, the range itself is made up of 3 different wheel sets. You've got a road wheel set, you've got a all-road wheel set, and then you've got a mountain bike wheel set. We're just going to focus on that road wheel set to start with. Now, I'm going to read off some of the literature that Hunt sent us, just so you can hear in their own words what they are describing this new range as. So they have said that they've developed leveraging recycled materials, less resource-intensive manufacturing processes, sustainability-focused specification choices, and shorter transportation distances to reduce the environmental impact of the wheel sets while offering high specification components and performance. Whoa, that was a lot of words. Further sustainability-focused product development updates will roll out over the coming months. And they have also said that these wheels will be available from kind of that. You can pre-order them now, but deliveries will be happening later in August. Now, the road wheel set that has been released is a 42mm deep carbon wheel set. Now, what Hunt is saying is that the rim is constructed using 10% recycled carbon fibre sourced from a specialist European recycled composite suppliers, which recycle much larger aerospace and automotive components, as well as offcuts from carbon fibre rim production. Now, they also claim, as far as the Hunt team is aware, this is the only manufacturer in the world that is currently creating rims with recycled carbon fibre content. Now, this is technically true, but what's worth remembering is that Chris King does partner with a company out in Utah called CSS Composites, and they utilize a material that they use called fusion fiber. Now, fusion fiber is a material that can be downcycled and used to create other products. So the ARD44s that Chris King makes, if when they reach the end of their life cycle, they can then be sent back to CSS and then be turned into a set of tyre levers, for example. So while Hunt might be the first people to be, creating rims with an element, and that's it, 90% of the rim is actually still brand new carbon fibre, an element of recycled carbon, there are other people out in the space trying to make carbon fibre a little bit more friendly to the environment. Now, that's all well and good, but we need to go a little bit deeper still, because these wheels actually match up really closely to the Hunt 40 Carbon Aero disc wheels.
Right.
Now, what we have to do is compare how these two wheel sets actually stack up against each other, because they are more expensive by a few £100, and they are heavier as well. And then they basically match every other metric. So I think you've really got to start asking yourself, why would you buy them?
It's tricky, isn't it? Yeah, I do think it's brilliant to see people making an effort in this space. I think it's really important. I don't actually think there is enough analysis and care taken in the bike industry. As we mentioned, carbon fibre just isn't particularly great for the environment. But yeah, it kind of needs to be incentivized, and maybe this is the beginning of that. Obviously, this is the first iteration of these wheels, but I mean, they need to be bought by lots of people for this to actually get some traction.
Yeah.
So as you say, yeah, it could leave them in a tricky situation that they've essentially got two very closely competing products that, with such a difference in price.
Yeah.
For the consumer, will they care enough?
And that's it. I think this wheel set really relies on the consumer caring more about the environment than they do about their wallet or performance. And if we know anything about people that go and buy a third-party wheel upgrade, it's not because they care about the environment, is it? Let's be real. So I think that I think you've really got to take it with a pinch of salt. And I really applaud Hunt for creating this and, arguably being a pioneer in the space.
For sure. Yeah.
But arguably, if no one buys it and it doesn't work, then it's probably not going to happen again. So I think I'm going to be keen to see what happens with the Phase 1 wheel range and see how it kind of develops over time.
The other thing as well is Phase 1, clues in the name. I think Hunt probably have a bit of a strategy in place around sort of being better to the environment, which I think is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. Like I said at the start, there's two other wheel sets, and those are both alloy wheel sets. And those wheel sets actually use a much higher percentage of recycled aluminium and things from like tin cans. So it's part of a wider picture. So yeah, like I say, we'll see what happens. Applaud Hunt for doing it, but the cynic in me says that maybe it might not work out all that well. Recently, we had a delivery come through from Muckoff, and they sent us their battery-powered pressure washer. And Joe, you've been testing it. Tell us about it.
I have. It's pretty cool, actually. So it's basically a box about, yeah, I'm sure we'll be flashing images up on screen. It's fairly compact. It's got a number of different attachments. It's completely battery operated and has a water reservoir, 20 litres, which Muckoff says is about enough to wash 4 bikes. In my limited testing so far, I think that's probably fair. And I kind of don't have that much to compare it to, which Sam, I think you've done some research on some other products.
Yeah.
But the big thing for me is I think it's really useful for a lot of people. If they live in flats, haven't got necessarily access to a hose pipe, to be able to wash your bike thoroughly, I think makes you take more care of your bike, and actually, yeah, as I say, really easy to do, and crucially, all in quite a small form factor.
So when I saw this, and when you told me that it landed in the office, I wanted to know how much it cost. Now, the starter bundle, so just the washer itself, comes in at £250. Now, I thought that was a fair old chunk of change.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see, okay, well actually, is that price justified? Are we paying cycling tax here? Could you get something that isn't related to the cycling industry and would actually cost a whole lot less? Now, after a bit of digging, actually, there isn't too much out there that kind of does exactly the same job as the Muckoff pressure washer.
Yep.
That is actually tailored towards cyclists and brings original features that you can't actually find on another product. The only thing that I could get close to seeing as a kind of a potential rival was the Karcher Mobile Clever OC3. Now, that one does cost nearly half the price of the Muckoff unit, but the water tank is less than half the size, it's not as powerful, and the runtime on the battery is 15 minutes compared to the Muckoff's 24 minutes. However, it does fold down to be really, really small because it's got a collapsible water tank. So I think if you just need to kind of like rinse off bikes or give something a kind of a light clean, then I think that would actually work pretty well. And if you can forego, you know, snow foam functionality, which can just be replicated by using a normal muck-off bottle, then I think that could actually stand to be a better value option for most people. I think what's really clear though, after, you know, testing the muck-off washer out in the car park, is that if you need to clean bikes really well, if you've got a lot of bikes to clean, or you just ride somewhere particularly dirty, or say if you race cyclocross and you need to be able to clean bikes in the pits, I think the muck-off option does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly. Sam put it really well there. We are paying some form of cycling tax, but muck-off have been clever, and it is a sort of product niche that doesn't already exist.
And it's justified.
And
I think that's the thing.
Yes, exactly right. So I think, yeah, in my experience, I have to say I was very, very impressed and sort of refreshed actually at just how much easier it makes the experience of cleaning your bike.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, that £250 is the entry-level price for just the washer. The prices then do go up to, I think, around £450 because they've created these different bundles. I would be loath to pay that much money, to be honest.
Yes, it's steep, isn't it? And I think the other thing is as well, it kind of, if you do go for sort of snow foam functionality, it kind of sucks you into maybe buying more of their products in the future, obviously. But then, as we said, it is also really effective. So yeah, it's a trade-off, isn't it?
I mean, I've left links to both washers down in the description below if you want to check them out for yourself, because I think what is clear is they both have their place for a whole range of cyclists. So yeah, go and check them out if you're interested. It is now time for Bike of the Month, and Joe, you have been testing bikes recently like an absolute madman, and we're going to chat about this one behind us. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. I've had a few on test recently. Our race bike of the year is on the way, but I've pulled this one out in particular, the Enve Melee, as a bike that's kind of struck me by surprise, to be honest. We were chatting in the office earlier about how when we saw the press shots of this bike, we were, I think, fair to say, slightly underwhelmed. Perhaps it didn't photograph that well, perhaps it's because of the satin paint job, I don't know, but when this turned up in the office, in person, I was absolutely stunned. I thought it looked absolutely brilliant. Super, super clean. One of my favourite things about this bike is there's only two brands that you will find on this bike at all. That is Shimano and Enve. Even the saddle is Selle Italia, but it's a collaboration with Enve. So everything's Enve branded. It's just really satisfying. It's really nice and it looks absolutely great, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing about something looking great though. Does the ride back it up?
It does, yes. This is honestly one of the most engaging and fun bikes I've ridden in really quite a while.
Okay.
Very stable, very confident. For a number of reasons, I think. Firstly, the cockpit setup is absolutely spot on. So Enve offer this bike, when you buy a full build of this bike, they do offer basically to customise the measurements, so you can choose your handlebars, choose your stem, which in a world of one-piece bar and stems that often don't quite fit, was really, really refreshing. That makes for, as I said, just handling that I'm really used to, which just makes me feel really at home on the bike, but also really comfortable ride feel. I'd say it didn't necessarily climb quite as well as other bikes I've been testing recently, compared to something like the new Giant TCR, for example. You know, it feels not like a HGV, that's unfair, but like you really notice the weight difference. But get this thing up to speed and it just sits there. It's got that sort of magic carpet-like ride feel, and yeah, really, really fun bike to ride.
Okay, interesting. So do you think then that this bike would be, because when you look at it, you do think of it as kind of being an all-round race bike. How do you think it compares to, say, kind of other do-it-all race bikes? Do you think that actually it can sit well amongst them, or do you think that it is more for your kind of Sunday cyclist?
That's a tricky thing to say. I think this bike sits closer to an aero bike than it does a climbing bike. And I think in that niche, it really compares very well. As I said, really fast rolling bike, of course, very subjective, but you know, when you're back-to-backing bikes, you can actually get quite a good feel for how a bike rolls. That's definitely down in no small part to the Enve wheels. We know they're some of the fastest wheels out there. It's a bike I very much enjoyed riding, but if I was given this bike to race on, I would potentially feel that I was at a slight disadvantage compared to some of maybe the other bigger name race bikes that we sort of know and love in that category. But yeah, so I think it sits between maybe an aero bike and a bike that's maybe more apt for, you know, real cycling enthusiasts. But by all means, I think there is more to cycling than just having the fastest bike based on a wind tunnel result, especially if you are just somebody that rides 3 or 4 times a week even.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, look, we'll leave it to all of you. Let us know, would you want to buy and ride a bike that's made by a component manufacturer?